thinking nothing too fair with which to deck her beauty. Wherever they wandered, she drew them back, for their very heartstrings were wound around her, and each and all strove to give her of their best. But now we come to the stories of men whose lives gather round a different center. Instead of the great mother city beside the Arno, with her strong towers and warlike citizens, the noise of battle ever sounding in her streets, and her flowery fields encircling her on every side, we have now Venice, queen of the sea. No warlike tread or tramp of angry crowds disturbs her fair streets, for here are no pavements, only cool green water, which now laps the walls of her marble palaces, and gives back the sound of the dipping oars and the soft echo of passing voices as the gondolas glide along her watery ways. Here are no grim gray towers of defense, but fairy palaces of white and colored marbles, which rise from the waters below as if they had been built by the sea nymphs, who had fashioned them of their own seashells and mother of pearl. There are no flowery meadows here, but instead the vast waters of the lagoons, which reach out until they meet the blue arc of the sky, or touch the distant mountains, which lie like a purple line upon the horizon. Here and there, tiny islands lie upon its bosom, so faint and fairy-like that they scarcely seem like solid land, reflected as they are in the transparent water. But although Venice has no meadows decked with flowers, no wealth of blossoming trees, everywhere, on every side, she shines with color. This wonderful sea-girt city. Her white marble palaces glow with a soft amber light. The cool green water that reflects her beauty glitters in rings of gold and blue, changing from color to color as each ripple changes its form. At sunset, when the sun disappears over the edge of the lagoon and leaves behind its trail of shining clouds, she is like a dream city rising from a sea of molten gold, a double city. For in the pure gold is reflected each tower and spire, each palace and campanile, in masses of pale yellow and quivering white light, and here and there a burning touch of flame color. She seems to have no connection with the solid, ordinary cities of the world. There she lies in all her beauty, silent and apart, like a white seabird floating upon the bosom of the ocean. Venice had always seemed separate and distinct from the rest of the world. Her cathedral of San Marco was never under the rule of Rome, and her rulers, or doges as they were called, governed the city as kings and did not trouble themselves with the affairs of other towns. Her merchant princes sailed to far countries, and brought home precious spoils to add to her beauty. Everything was as rich and rare and splendid as it was possible to make it, and she was unlike any other city on earth. So the painters who lived and worked in this city of the sea had their own special way of painting, which was different to that of the Florentine school. From their babyhood, these men had looked upon all this beauty of color, and the love of it had grown with their growth. The golden light on the water, the pearl gray and tinted marbles, the gay sails of the galleys which swept the lagoons like painted butterflies, the wide stretch of water ending in the mystery of the distant skyline, it all sank into their hearts, and it was little wonder that they should strive to paint color above all things, and at last reach a perfection such as no other school of painters has equaled. As with the Florentine artists, so with these Venetian painters, we must leave many names unnoticed just now, and learn first to know those which shine out clearest among the many bright stars of fame. In the beginning of the 15th century, 400 years ago, when Fra Filippo Lippi was painting in Florence, there lived in Venice a certain Jacopo Bellini, who was a painter and who had two sons called Gentile and Giovanni. The father taught his boys with great care and gave them the best training he could, for he was anxious that his sons should become great painters. He saw that they were both clever and quick to learn, and he hoped great things of them. Never do less than your very best, he would say, as he taught the boys how to draw and use their colors. See how the Tuscan artists strive with one another, each desiring to do most honor to their city of Florence. So, Gentile, I would have thee also strive to be great, and thou, Giovanni, endeavor to be even greater than thy brother. But though the boys were thus taught to try and outdo each other, still they were always the best of friends, and there was never any unkind rivalry between them. Gentile, the eldest, was fond of painting story pictures, which told the history of Venice, and showed the magnificent doges and nobles and people of the city, dressed in their rich robes. The Venetians loved pictures which showed forth the glory of their city, and very soon Gentile was invited to paint the walls of the ducal palace with his historical pictures. Now Venice carried on a great trade with her ships, which sailed to many foreign lands. These ships, loaded with merchandise, touched at different ports, and the merchants sold their goods or took in exchange other things which they brought back to Venice. It happened that one of the ships which set sail for Turkey had on board, among other things, several pictures painted by Giovanni Bellini. These were shown to the Sultan of Turkey, who had never seen a picture before, and he was amazed and delighted beyond words. His religion forbade the making of pictures, But he paid no attention now to that law, but sent a messenger to Venice praying that the painter Bellini might come to him at once. The rulers of Venice were unwilling to spare Giovanni just then, but they allowed Gentile to go, as his work at the ducal palace was finished. So Gentile took his canvases and paints, and setting sail in one of the merchant ships, soon arrived at the court of the Grand Turk. He was received with every honor, and nothing was thought too good for this wonderful painter, who could make pictures which looked like living men. The Sultan loaded him with gifts and favors, and he lived there like a royal prince. Each picture painted by Gentile was thought more wonderful than the last. He painted a portrait of the Sultan, and even one of himself, which was considered little short of magic. Thus a whole year passed by, and Gentile had a most delightful time, and was well contented, until one day something happened which disturbed his peace. He had painted a picture of the dancing daughter of Herodias, with the head of John the Baptist in her hand, and when he was finished, he brought it and presented it to the Sultan. As usual, the Sultan was charmed with the new picture, but he paused in his praises of its beauty and looked thoughtfully at the head of St. John, and then frowned. "It seems to me," he said, "that there is something not quite right about that head. I do not think a head which has just been cut off would look exactly as that does in your picture." Gentile answered courteously that he did not wish to contradict his Royal Highness, but it seemed to him that the head was right. "We shall see," said the Sultan calmly, and he turned carelessly to a guard who stood close by, and bade him to cut the head of one of the slaves that Bellini might see if his picture was really correctly painted. This was more than Gentile could stand. "Who knows," he said to himself, "that the Sultan may not wish to see next how my head would look cut off from my body." So while his precious head was still safe upon his shoulders, he thought it wise to slip quietly away and return to Venice by the very first ship he could find. Meanwhile, Giovanni had worked steadily on, and had far surpassed both his father and his brother. Indeed, he had become the greatest painter in Venice, the first of that wonderful Venetian school which learned to paint such marvelous color. With all the wealth of delicate shading spread out before his eyes, with the ever-changing wonder of the opal-tinted sea meeting him on every side, it was not strange that the love of color sank into his very heart. In his pictures we see the golden glow which bathes the marble palaces, the clear green of the water, the pure blues and burning crimsons, all as